Right now, it's so hard to separate the hype about AI and what it's actually capable of and useful for. So in this video, I'm going to show you 15 ways I use various AI tools for everyday tasks that help me get things done faster, more efficiently, and not just for video creation, although I'll be talking about that and how I use it for making YouTube videos, but just simple file organization, scheduled tasks that can help with your email, letting it use your web browser, and some of the latest connectors with Claude that actually help me run my business, like Bear, Fastmail, and Circle. So most of the tasks I'm going to show you today, I do with Claude and Claude Cowork. I don't use Claude Code, but ChatGPT will get a shout out in a little bit too. When you install the Claude app on your Mac, if you go up to Claude and then Settings, this is where you can connect third-party services and give Claude a little more access to your computer. This way it can really be useful. Now, I have it connected to things like Notion. There's some new third-party MCP servers, which means companies like Fastmail, which I do my email through, and Circle have created first-party connectors for Claude, so you don't have to download something random off GitHub made by a developer you don't know. And I also give Claude access to Chrome web browser via an extension and access to some folders in my file system. Now, if you're running the latest version of the Claude app, you'll see here in the top left corner, there's Chat, which I do a few tasks in, and then the second tab is Cowork. This is where it can really take action with things on your computer, and this is where I'll show you my first task. If you need to format, rename, or maybe crop images in bulk, Claude Cowork can help with that. So the first thing I'll do is actually point it at a folder. I'll click here where it says Work on a Project, and I'm going to choose a specific folder for Claude to work in. I actually have my Downloads folder, and here I have chapter images. These are a bunch of images that I want to use as chapter artwork, so I need to crop them as square, but the names are also gibberish, so I'd like Claude to rename these as well. If this is a new folder that you've never given Claude access to, it's going to ask whether you want to allow or always allow. On some folders, I just choose to always allow. And then I'll tell it something like, crop each of these images into a perfect square. Focus on the subject if applicable and rename the file based on its content. So Claude Cowork can actually look at the images and actually base the name off of that. It doesn't just have to be a text file or a document. And it can actually crop the images for me as well. Now, depending on how many images you're doing, it might take a minute for Claude to work. You see, even the system is asking whether Claude can have permissions to that folder. I'm going to allow. And if I actually go to that folder here in my Finder, I'll probably see Claude start working. Now, the nice thing is, with the latest versions of the Claude app, I can leave this task running and start another task. So I'm going to have to start running one more task. I shared in a recent video a shortcut where I save all the screenshots from my iPhone to a folder in my iCloud Drive. This way it doesn't have to clutter my photo library, but I still have access to them. We'll come back to check on that cropping task in a minute. But you'll see here in my personal folder, I have a bunch of screenshots. Many of them are not renamed anything specific, but if I ever want to search these screenshots, I can ask Claude to do that for me. You can actually see in a previous conversation, I asked it, do I have any screenshots about Uno? I said, look through all the files until you find one. And then sure enough, Claude was able to pull it up right here. And this is from that screenshot folder. So now I can search and have all my screenshots available, but not have them cluttering up my phone. But I'm going to start a new task, and this one will probably take a while. You see, I've given it access to my screenshots folder in the past. This task doesn't need to have the chapter images folder. I'm going to tell it to act without asking. Now, this is something you'll see across Claude and different Cowork tasks, which is, do you want it to be able to just do stuff without you approving it or not? And in a minute, I'll show you a Mac Mini server that I have running where I do have Claude Cowork controlling the entire computer. We'll get to that in a second. But for this task, I'm going to have it act without asking. Yes, continue. And I'll simply tell it, rename all the files in this folder based on the image content. I'll send that task over to Claude, and now it can be working on multiple tasks simultaneously. Here it's working on renaming all my screenshots, and here it's working on cropping and renaming those chapter images. Again, I have a system approval, so I'll click allow. And now that this renaming task is running, I can see here in my recent conversations that the crop and rename images task is done. So if I check that out, it looks like it ran without any hitches. Let's look at the Finder window. And Claude actually created a new folder where it put these square crops, which is pretty smart. It actually kept my original images. And then here in this folder called squares, every screenshot is actually named appropriately. And guess what? Every image is a perfect square. Now I can just drag these in to make chapter artwork, and I'm good to go. So when it comes to file management, file renaming in bulk, and even adjusting some files, and it can also add text to documents if you give it access and more, Claude Cowork can be really useful for those tasks. And you can even set up automated tasks here in the Scheduled tab in the Claude app, and here you can have tasks run hourly or daily. And I have a few of those processing my email and some other things we'll get to in a minute. Now, a task I might jump to just the regular Claude chat instead of Claude Cowork is for research or finding links to things. So a prime example is one of my recent videos. Once it was announced that John Ternus would officially be Apple's new CEO, I wanted to make a video about it, and one of the things I needed was a lot of B-roll of John Turnus on stage at Apple keynotes. Well, I could try to search YouTube and find every keynote where he might have appeared, but using a chat like Claude can really help speed up that process of finding the right video. One, I knew there was an interview with MKBHD where they interviewed in like a factory and talked about iPhone repairability, so I asked Claude to find me that video and immediately got that link. And then something that really saved me time is I asked for all the YouTube links of every Apple keynote where John Turnus appears, and then output that in a simple plain text list. Claude worked for a while, and then sure enough, I got this text block right here. Every keynote that John Turnus had appeared in with links to all of them on YouTube. This right here, being able to aggregate a bunch of links about a topic quickly, this is what AI can be great at rather than you actually searching, opening in multiple tabs, trying to save those links to a note. For what I'll call research aggregation, AI apps are great at it. Then something I knew wasn't a keynote video, but I had seen people post John Turnus on stage for the MacBook Neo event. I asked it to find me anything it could on that, and sure enough, it found me a 9to5Mac video shared on Facebook of John Turnus at that event, and sure enough, there's John Turnus at the MacBook Neo event. I'm gonna go back to Claude Cowork and check on the task about renaming my screenshots. It seems like it's still working through all of those. I see it's renamed a lot of them, but we'll come back when it's actually done. Now, if you ever have a reason to pull timestamps or chapter markers for something you've recorded, maybe it's just a video or audio file, a meeting, you might have recorded a voice memo, AI is actually great at this too. So one issue I've had is as we record our video podcast, Primary Technology, subscribe above. You can also scan one of these QR codes and you can go right to it, watch it now. I need the chapter timestamps both for YouTube and for the audio version. And Riverside generates a lot of chapters, usually way more than I actually want. The naming is not ideal, and it would take me much longer to edit or delete the chapters here in Riverside than just asking Claude to do it for me. So once I'm done editing here in Riverside, I'll download a subtitles file, which actually has timestamps with everything we're saying. And then I go over to Claude, just a regular chat, not Cowork. I give it that .srt file, and I tell it, these are the chapters I want. The exact names, just give me the timestamps for each of these chapters. And after a couple minutes, Claude works at it and then gives me exactly what I want. My chapter names, just the chapters I want, and the timestamps. And then remember, you can ask it just to change little things, like it gave me leading zeros for the hour. I didn't need those, so I told it, just give me those timestamps without the leading zeros, and then it was perfect. I can copy and paste this, and I have my chapter markers. Also, Claude even told me some of the reasoning it had behind the chapter markers and if I wanted to change that. And I've done this for several weeks, and I found these timestamps when I'm telling it the topics that I want to dictate. It has done this really well. All right, let's check back on our Cowork task. This was renaming all of our screenshots. It said it's done. Let's check on it. Here's all the screenshots. There were 265 right now, and they all look renamed, all pretty accurate. Let's see, empty inbox focus filter. Yep, that's accurate. Apple 50th anniversary vintage computer. Yep, that sounds good too. So now all my screenshots are renamed properly, and if I ever need to find a specific screenshot, I can just ask Claude Cowork, and I don't have to have them on my phone. Now let's switch gears and talk about image manipulation. Now, as a content creator, I don't generate things full cloth from AI. Sometimes I use 11 Labs to generate my voice for a daily show just for paying members, and I make it clear when it's generated. Just as a side note, I actually trained a professional voice clone with 11 Labs, giving it hours of my own podcast audio. And then I actually have a shortcut where if I do need to generate with AI because I'm traveling or just can't get to a microphone, I can hit one shortcut with 5 news stories just on my clipboard. And it sounds like this. Continuing to face intermittent disruptions after what Chief Operating Officer Rose Wang described as an ongoing cyber attack. The company said a sophisticated distributed denial of service attack began around 8:40 p.m. But the one place I'll use AI to help me with some of my image manipulation is with thumbnails, and specifically only the thumbnails when it comes to shortcuts. Just checking the current count, I have 71 shortcuts videos right now on the channel. And listen, I can only have so many thumbnails of just me cheesing to the camera with shortcuts floating around. So I want to try something fun with those. And so I just do it with my shortcuts thumbnails. But you'll see this one right here, manipulated by AI, not created totally. I'll show you the difference. I'll still create some shortcuts thumbnails totally by myself. This was using the Warp tool in Pixelmator, but you'll see another shortcuts thumbnail that was manipulated by AI. Obviously me doing a Kamehameha was AI. I couldn't do that with my own skills. And for this task specifically, I'm actually using the new ChatGPT Images 2.0. Now for a long time, I was using Gemini's Nano Banana for some of that manipulation and it was better, but since 2.0 ChatGPT came out, I actually think it's better. But let's do a side-by-side test. So often what I will do is make an actual image. This is me in my studio. I'll do a screen grab of a frame and then I'll put a bunch of shortcuts on screen that hopefully the AI manipulates and keeps accurate. So this was all me. I made this part of the image, and I'm going to give that image to the AI along with a couple inspiration images, namely Thor from the comic books and the movies. I'm going to give ChatGPT images and Gemini Nano Banana the same images, same inspiration. I'm going to give it a pretty lengthy prompt because I've done this a number of times and sometimes it does weird things to the images. So let's run it. I'm using both the thinking model for Gemini and ChatGPT images. So it's going to take a minute, but let's see what it comes up with. All right, even on the thinking model, Gemini did output something first. We'll check the resolution in a second. The image looks not bad. It really didn't change the shortcuts pretty much at all, except for this one. It's kind of floating out there in the middle of nowhere, but it did the lightning, it put a blue glow on me, and it doesn't look super AI generated. Now, full resolution, this image is 2752 by 1536. I'll probably bring this into Pixelmator and use super resolution to upscale it all the way up to 4K, but not bad overall. I would probably go through a couple other iterations and have it manipulate the shortcut cards a little more, have them look like they're actually moving away from me, which the AIs are pretty good when I ask it for little edits like that. All right, now here's ChatGPT Images 2.0. Now this definitely did more to it, so it starts feeling a little more AI generated, but I do like where this is going. I might try the prompt again and tell it to not adjust me as much. This image is 1672 by 941, not as high resolution as the Gemini one. You can tell I'm looking a little smooth and shiny like I was done by AI, but I do like how it manipulated the shortcuts. It looks like they have some motion. And both ChatGPT and Google Gemini are pretty good at keeping the text accurate and not messing with the little icons on the shortcuts. The earlier versions of the image tools would really mess a lot of that up, so not bad. All right, before we get into some of these scheduled tasks and new connectors like Circle and Fastmail, I do want to show you one other ChatGPT task, and I keep coming back to ChatGPT for this because I did a custom GPT a while ago, trained it on my best performing videos. And what I'll do is give it a transcript of a video I just recorded. I have the text transcript here. I use the app Transcriptionist to do that. I'm going to do this process as soon as I'm done recording this video and editing it as well. And then I have a text expander snippet for a little prompt asking it for title ideas, descriptions, and tags. Now, while Claude doesn't have like custom Claudes, it does have what it calls projects. So I've been repeatedly asking Claude about YouTube videos. I gave it some context of my past well-performing videos. So let's actually run the exact same prompt with the same transcript, and you can be the judge of which has better titles and thumbnail ideas. I'm going to use Sonnet on Claude because I think my custom GPT just uses whatever the latest fast model is for ChatGPT. So this is for a video coming out next week. It says 10 Apple Intelligence features you should actually use. I have my description. I have the tags. I'll often just copy and paste this into the YouTube tag field, but it also gives me some alternative titles. You'll see them there, and some ideas of what text to put on the thumbnail when I make that. Now, Claude also has some ideas. Title idea is pretty similar. Description also fairly similar, and you'll see the alternatives right here. And typically what I'll do is take one of the titles that I might lean towards more, and then ask Claude or ChatGPT to give me 10 more ideas based on that. They're pretty close neck and neck right now. I find sometimes I like ChatGPT's output better, sometimes Claude. So when I'm processing a YouTube video for titles and descriptions, I'll just run them both side by side. Now, going back to Claude Cowork, there's some new connectors specifically for services that I use. So I'm going to go into the settings, go to connectors, and here you'll see I have connected it to Xcode, which we'll get to in a second. But Circle has a custom MCP. You can see you just use this URL, and then you would log in with your account. And Fastmail also has a custom MCP. But the nice thing is, once you connect these, even things like Fastmail, which is literally my email provider, so this has all my email, I can tell Claude Cowork, you're always allowed to read my email and even search my email, but if you're going to write any emails or delete something, you have to ask for permission. I like this granular control using these MCP connectors, but one task I let it do without asking is draft emails, because I have a scheduled task that has really been helping out, so we'll get to that. But with this connector, that means I can ask it things about my email or schedule tasks to run automatically. So I'm going to tell this to act without asking, and I can ask it questions about my email. I know I'm subscribed to the Pod News newsletter. I get that every day. So I can ask it, just give me a 3-sentence summary of the latest Pod News newsletter. And then I could do a scheduled task that asks it to summarize multiple newsletters I get every day, maybe from The Verge, Joanna Stern's New Things, Platformer, and Pod News, and then I can get a rundown of all my newsletters waiting for me right here in Claude. Or you can also connect Apple Notes to Claude and just have it create an Apple Note for you. So here you can read with Apple Notes, but you can also give it permission to just create Apple Notes for you, and that summary could wait for you there. While it's working on that, let's start one other Cowork task, which is I've connected it to Circle, which is my shortcuts community. You can join right now by scanning this QR code, join over 4,000 active members. Plus, you can pay to support, and Shortcuts University just launched. I have a deal going right now for $50 off. It's over 12 hours of video content teaching shortcuts beginning to end, from beginner to advanced level. So you could scan this here. But I can ask it questions about my Circle community, about paid or free membership, and even have it create posts and do things in my Circle community if I give it permission. I'll ask it something simple like how many active members are in my Circle community. You'll also see when it gets to this loading tools section, when it's pulling from what connectors, and you can see it accurately knew to pull from Circle specifically. And just like that, I have right here, your Circle community currently has over 5,200 active members. Another reason you should join. But then I can ask it more business related questions like, what has been the growth of paid membership over the last 6 months? And because it has access to all my data, at least to read it, not necessarily write it, I can ask it in-depth questions like this. And sometimes finding this information in the Circle database can be hard, but I can just let Claude do it for me, and it's just going to give me a plain answer. Let me check back on that pod news real quick, and you can see it gave me a summary right here of the latest pod news newsletter, actually linked me to the sources right here, and I can just click these and read them on the web if I want. Now, while it's still working on this, let me tell you about one of these scheduled tasks I have working in my email. And you can connect Gmail directly to Claude, and there's a first-party connector for that too. Now, when it comes to scheduled tasks, I don't like these running on my main Mac Studio machine that I use for production every day. Plus, this Mac goes to sleep, and I want a Mac that has scheduled tasks to never sleep. This way it's always ready to do stuff. So I actually have Claude with Cowork running on a Mac Mini over in a closet. And so I'm actually screen sharing to that Mac Mini right now, and you can see several of my scheduled tasks. One, I call it podcast and blog mentions. That I actually have it browsing multiple websites to see, has my work been linked anywhere? Sometimes I might see a spike in views, or I just want to know if someone that I really admire actually mentioned me in an article. And because I also have Notion connected to Claude Cowork, I can actually have it dump all of that in a Notion webpage. So I have this called Cowork Podcast Mentions. I can see the last time it was updated, which was today. And it has a running list of mentions. And I know I was talked about in the Accidental Tech Podcast bonus episode. Has a link to that episode here, what it was about, and what video of mine they actually linked to. So I have this running every day, just scouring all these different websites, and I don't know if somebody mentions me. Maybe that's a little vain, but I get excited when my videos and content is talked about by people who I've followed for years. But anyway, Claude Cowork can also use the browser to check a website, maybe if it's something you want to see if it gets in stock. I was looking for the Ubiquity travel router for a while. It was out of stock forever. Well, you can have Claude Cowork use the browser automatically. I have it doing it on this Mac Mini, checking for things that might be out of stock, and when it gets in stock, I can actually have it send me a notification by loading a push-cut URL. Claude Cowork can do all of that. And I also have it connected with Fastmail to do what I call a sponsor sweep. Now, I use SaneBox to manage my email, and this way my inbox stays pretty clean, and I have Sane Later, Sane News folders, but as you can see, a lot of email gets put there, and sometimes potential sponsors get put there as well. But now that Claude Cowork has access to my Fastmail, at least to read it, I have this scheduled to happen every day at 4 p.m., just once a day. It looks through the folders where sponsors might get caught, like my newsletter or Sane Later folder, looks for anything that might look like a sponsor, and then drafts an email to that sender. Then once a day, I can just go to my mail app, look at my drafts folder, and then any potential sponsors that might have come in today, I'll have draft emails here. I can choose to either send it or delete it if it's a sponsor I'm not interested in. And so this gives me peace of mind that I'm not missing sponsor emails, but helps me manage it way better than trying to browse the 1,000 emails a day stuck in my newsletters and junk folders. Now, another recent connector that just came out earlier this week was Bear. I use Bear for all of my notes. I'm literally reading off a Bear note as I record this video. This was my note for that. And you can give Claude Cowork access to write and edit your Bear notes. I haven't done that just yet, but it can read the Bear notes. So I can ask it things like, I'm telling it to get all the shortcut.bot links from the last week in my Bear notes. I use Bitly to shorten all of the links that I share of shortcuts, whether it's Instagram Reels or on YouTube. And I have all those links in Bear notes, but they're not super organized. Sometimes it can be tough to aggregate them all. So again, talking about aggregation, I can just ask Claude Cowork to get all those links from the last week and just that natural language request. This is one of the reasons why I use Claude Cowork for some tasks as opposed to shortcuts, because while you might be able to do something like this in shortcuts, you have to be very precise about how you're filtering and finding notes, the actual dates and formatting the dates, where with Claude Cowork, I can just have a more natural language request and it just parses it. Just so you know, you have to be updated to the latest version of Bear, and then once you open it, go up to Help, Advanced, and then Install Claude Connector. And then back here in Claude, you can configure it, and here I've given it always allow access for reading my notes, but for any kind of writing or deleting, it needs approval for all of that. And now Claude Cowork got it all. It even tells me what note it pulled from, so here's Apple Intelligence Part 14, my shortcuts back up, but just the new links that I added recently. And while bare search is pretty good, you would still have to go through individual notes to kind of pull information together. And Claude Cowork has been good at that. But get subscribed because I'm going to keep working with the Bear connector, Fastmail, and Circle and see what other useful tasks, especially scheduled tasks. That automation I think can really be powerful. I'll see what's useful and report back. Now another thing you can do, and I put this on the Mac Mini in the server closet, is you can actually install the Claude extension in a browser, and it doesn't have to be Chrome. I'm actually using it in the Brave browser. Still works great there. I can choose to ask before acting, or for this use case, I'm going to say act without asking. And something I've shared in past videos, finding a promo code on a website, actually AI is great for that too. And the nice thing is, instead of just asking an AI for promo codes and me trying them personally, I can tell Claude to just take action in the browser, try them, and keep going until you find a promo code that works. You'll kind of see that orange haze around the page. That means Claude is now going to start controlling my browser. Again, be careful, especially if you have saved passwords or saved payment information in your browser. That's why I kind of run this and the whole computer control in a bit of a sandbox. This way it's on this Mac Mini and it's not on my main machine. But we'll leave this going. You can also see it's opening other tabs there at the top of the browser looking for those promo codes, and then it will come back and hopefully try them here on the Wayfair webpage until one is accepted. Now, a couple other use cases, I've mentioned this in past videos, but I still use Gling.ai to process every single one of my videos, from my Reels and Shorts to my full-length YouTube videos. I put the A roll here in Gling, and then Gling will transcribe it, eliminate silences and bad takes. Like up here, you can see I started and stopped the same sentence multiple times, and Gling is pretty smart to just recognize to take the last good take where I actually kept going, and this speeds up my editing process a ton. I actually export this as a Final Cut multicam clip, sync my B-roll and screen grabs, and I did a whole video on this talking about my process in general. I'll link that video above, or you can scan this QR code and see how I make all my YouTube videos fast. And while it's working to find some promo codes, one shortcut that has really sped up a process for Primary Tech Daily, that's the daily podcast with news. So I call this my PTS, Primary Tech Show Daily Aggregator. I'm actually not going to share this shortcut in the description, just keeping this one a little close to the chest because, one, there's some RSS feeds that I pay for that I don't want to have public out there because everybody should pay for them if they want them. But I've also connected this to Transistor, my podcast host. So basically the entire podcast can be ready for me to publish once I record the audio. When I run this shortcut, it's actually pulling articles from multiple RSS feeds, aggregating all of them, and giving them to ChatGPT using the ChatGPT API, so I can use the latest model in this shortcut. And ChatGPT is actually going to look at all those articles and try to determine the top stories of the day based on how many times they're covered across different sources and just how important they look. But I don't want it to just decide the top 5 stories. I want to be able to choose them. So I actually tell it to give me the top 10 stories, and now it shows me a choose from menu. So I can actually choose the stories that I think look the most important. And then once I choose those 5, it's going to go back, take those 5 articles, summarize them, again using ChatGPT's model, and then it's going to format both show notes and a script for me to look at with the top news of the day, and even create the draft episode in Transistor, my podcast host, so it's ready to publish with one click. So you can see it's running here in the background. It's also creating a bare note with the script that I'm actually going to read. And then once this shortcut is done running, I have the bare note ready to go. So this is the title, here's the show notes and links, and here's actually the 5 stories that I'm going to read down and record. And then here in Transistor, where I host Primary Tech Daily, I can go view. You see there's one draft episode ready. Already has the title that it was generated through that shortcut. All I have to do is upload my audio file here, the artwork for the day here, and it has the show notes formatted with clickable HTML links. Just upload the audio and I can hit publish. All right, while I'm still looking for promo codes over here in the browser, I will say you can use Claude and ChatGPT codecs directly in Xcode if you want to try and vibe code an app. I connected Claude and I'm using it in agentic mode and it's just doing stuff. But I also, on this Mac Mini, gave Claude full computer control, which is wild. But in doing so, it can click around to different apps and even do things like use Icon Composer to design an icon all by itself. I didn't touch Icon Composer or do anything at all. I just gave it a prompt. And anytime I want to make a change to the app, deploy it again, I can just tell Claude here in the Cowork section, which will then use the computer, and it can do whatever it wants. Now, I do monitor it. Again, this is on a sandboxed Mac Mini, so I would be careful, but it is wild to see Claude is using your computer and it just be doing stuff. Now, some people have said that ChatGPT Codex is even better for this, especially coding. I've been using it in Xcode, but I found the Codex Mac app. I asked it to do a few things. I thought I had all the permissions set properly, but it just seemed to not be able to take as much action as I needed it to. I'll keep playing around with Codex, and if there's a specific use case aside from coding and app development that you find it to be amazing at, let me know. But I find Claude Cowork, especially with all the new connectors like Bear and Fastmail, plus the ability to control your browser and even your computer if need be, it has been super useful. And you'll be hearing about this app pretty soon on Primary Technology. Again, that's my weekly tech podcast with Jason A10. You can subscribe up here, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button to this channel. If you want to know more about these AI tools, how I'm using them, or just the latest updates, let me know what you would like to hear, what tools you might be using or want to learn more about. And if you want a more how-to or step-by-step on Claude Cowork and actually setting it up, using it with Apple Notes, I did a video on that a couple months ago right here. It's still applicable, especially with setting up with some of those basic connectors, so that'll walk you through the tutorial, and I'll leave a video right up here that YouTube thinks you'll really enjoy. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.